Alleged British hacker Lauri Love has been given the green light to appeal his extradition to the US, where he's wanted for cyber hacking. He's accused of stealing large amounts of data from the FBI, NASA and the US Central Bank between 2012 and 2013. Solicitors for Love, who has Asperger's syndrome, say he would not be able to handle the maximum sentence, which could be up to 99 years, in a US prison. Last year, the Home Secretary approved his extradition to America. His lawyers say the appeal will most likely be heard in August or September. And earlier I spoke to Love, who, despite welcoming today's announcement, says the whole ordeal has had a significant impact on his health.
I'm really happy that we got this news and not the other news that would mean I would be getting kidnapped imminently, so we're very thankful for it.
Were you expecting this result in any way? Has it come out of the blue, or was this something you really were hoping for?
Yeah, we just didn't know when we'd hear, so it was due any time this week, and we were quite expecting the appeal to be heard because it is of great importance, as the High Court judge has written in their statement today, and also because Liberty, the human rights group, has asked to intervene. So.
You mentioned earlier that it means that perhaps you won't be, in effect, kidnapped. Now, of course, there'll be many saying that you should really be going to the US to answer those charges. What do you make of those people who say you've allegedly committed a crime, and you should be going there to face justice?
Yeah, so all we're asking for in this appeal is that the UK jurisdiction applies. So I've never been to America. It's not that I've escaped from there after committing some crimes. Any crimes, if they were committed in the UK, and we have computer crime laws here, and we have perfectly functioning courts. So I'm just asking for what anybody else in a similar position would expect, and that's to be tried in the courts of the country.
It's been said that your case raises issues of great importance. I mean, any idea what they could be? I mean, you've mentioned a couple of things earlier, but what do you think could have actually turned this?
Well, I mean, a big factor is the maximum sentence that I could receive for the charges here in the UK would amount to about 18 months of a custodial sentence, whereas in the US I'm facing up to 99 years. This is wildly disproportionate compared to the UK.
Briefly, Lauri, what impact has this ordeal had on you and the family?
So my health is quite poor to begin with. I've had to stop my university studies because of the verdict at the district court. I lose a lot of sleep, I have depression, I've recently had some heart problems and digestive issues, so I'm waiting for some results from the doctors. Hopefully now we can breathe a little easier and I may be able to get back on with some productive work.
Lauri Love's US attorney, Tor Eklund, told me that the US system, when it comes to hacking, is unjust.
It's really a question of what your definition of justice is. I'm of the opinion, as someone who regularly litigates computer crimes in the United States, that the United States system, when it comes to computer crimes, is actually not just, and that there's a bit of a hysterical attitude towards hackers in the United States that leads to these rather draconian prosecutions. Because if you look at what happened here, I don't really think there was any real harm here. I think some people were embarrassed, you know, if what he did was true. You know, he needs to face some sort of punishment, but 100 years in jail for this, I think is ridiculous.
What hopes do you have for this appeal? What do you think could be the outcome?
Well, my understanding is that going to the High Court isn't the end of the appeals, but I'm hopeful just by the mere fact that they granted this appeal, because they could have denied it, and if they denied it, they would have been essentially saying there is no case here. And by allowing it to continue, they're saying, you know, there's something we need to consider here and think deeply about, so that gives me hope.
Lauri Love's case echoes that of Gary McKinnon, who was also wanted in the US for allegedly being behind the biggest hack of all time back in 2002. But in 2012, the then Home Secretary, Theresa May, threw out the extradition order.
Mr. McKinnon is accused of serious crimes, but there is also no doubt that he is seriously ill. He has Asperger's syndrome and suffers from depressive illness. The legal question before me is now whether the extent of that illness is sufficient to preclude extradition. As the House would expect, I have very carefully considered the representations made on Mr. McKinnon's behalf, including from a number of clinicians. I have obtained my own medical advice from practitioners recommended to me by the Chief Medical Officer, and I have taken extensive legal advice. After careful consideration of all of the relevant material, I have concluded that Mr. McKinnon's extradition would give rise to such a high risk of him ending his life that a decision to extradite would be incompatible with Mr McKinnon's human rights. I have therefore withdrawn the extradition order against Mr McKinnon.
Back then, Theresa May announced the Forum Bar, which is legislation to protect vulnerable individuals from extradition if they can be tried in the UK instead. And that was what helped halt Gary McKinnon's extradition. Well, earlier I spoke to McKinnon's mother, Janice Sharp, and she says the Forum Bar should apply in this case as well.
Under this Forum Bar is difficult to understand, because if it doesn't apply to Lauri Love, who does it apply to? And Theresa May brought it in specifically for people who had never left this country, who were based in this country and who were physically in this country when the crime was committed. And the judges seem to almost be ignoring this ruling, and I don't understand why, because it definitely should apply to someone like Lauri. Lauri could quite easily take his life. I know what he's going through. I know his father has heart trouble and is very ill. So it's exactly the kind of person it should apply to. And today you had Adam Mudd, who was accused of hacking, and he was sentenced today in the UK and given 2 years. Now, 2 years is a much more appropriate sentence than 99. 99 years is a death sentence. And even if it isn't 99, even if it's 40 years, there's a good likelihood that Lauri could die in prison.